We were due for a mailbag here on the call up, and that's exactly what we got for you today. Of course, I'm Arm Layton. He's Jack McMullen. Different booth setup here. It's funny because we've got a lot of these episodes in before you have to call a game.
Yeah.
And this is now the before the game spring training booth for you.
hmm
You're
Yeah.
in Palm Beach right now, right? The Nationals and Astros complex, or no,
I,
you're in Roger Dean. You're in
I'm at
Roger Dean.
Roger Dean, baby.
You're not at Cacti Park, sponsored by Travis Scott's Beverage. You are in
Yeah,
Roger Dean,
Cacti
sponsored by
Hard
Roger Dean
Seltzer.
Chevrolet.
Exactly. Not Cacti Park of the Palm Beaches, which Cacti Hard Seltzer I have not seen once anywhere, but they signed a 10-year agreement for the naming rights for that spring training ballpark. So you know what? Like, okay, is that the brand awareness that they're going after?
We had when I was in college, because I think it was or right after college, whenever they came out. Maybe it was well after, and I'm blurring times. But I had one friend bring that to the pregame. Everyone tried it, and they said, "Never bring this shit back ever again." And and everyone Venmo requested him. It was like we called it like the cacti rebate. So hopefully they've got the formula going a little bit better. Obviously they're sponsoring the spring training ballpark. It gets me every single time. But I do want to actually talk about that real quick off the top.
Yeah.
That game that we were able to see in Palm Beach real quick. I think we talked
hmm
a little bit about it on the Just Baseball show before we get into the mailbag. Ryan Weathers, I know he's not a prospect, but
Dude.
holy crap, he was throwing 99. And then I'm watching, Dylan Cruz on that heater. And then he waves at the slider, and I'm like, oh, here we go. It's Dylan Cruz struggling with sliders again. No, I'm gonna take that back a little bit because I think I tweeted like Dylan Cruz is gonna get spun to death, which he is, by the way. Still, he's gonna get spun to, and that's what was my big takeaway from the game. I want to tee you up for Ryan Weathers, but
Yeah.
Dylan Cruz, like even in spring training, he's getting spun to death. He's gonna have to prove that he can hit those sliders, or at least consistently lay off of them, but also kind of hit them if he's going to be, the guy that he needs to be or can be. But like that's what pitchers are going to clearly challenge him with. I don't know if you even noticed. I'm sure you did. You were calling the freaking game, but like
Yeah.
how much Dylan Cruz was getting spun even in a spring training game.
Yeah, I mean, there's clearly a plan of attack against him, and you're right. Like, it's now his priority 1A to make sure that he can lay off that slider low and away. And we've seen guys whose careers have not taken off to the level that we expect them to. I think about Javi Baez. I think about some other guys, but Baez is probably the most public example where the stubbornness and the inability to lay off that slider low and away right on right is limiting the cap of Baez. And he made $140 million. Like he was a
Yeah.
great player in Chicago, but he could be a superstar and he could still be one. I'm not saying Dylan Cruz is Javier Baez, but he didn't face this quality of slider at LSU. If he figures out a way to lay off that right on right slider, drifting low and away from him, I mean, he's got all-star potential, man.
Oh,
Like I watch him play center, I watch him play the corners, and I mean, the like that swing is so compact too. Like it's really just a swing decision thing for me, and then that's all-star Dylan Cruz there.
yeah, it's a small like pitch recognition side of things, and then I think it's just being able to stay on it a little bit longer because he's so compact, as you allude to. It's so direct
Yeah,
that it can take him off of it really quickly too. If he thinks it's a fastball that he's getting directly to, middle in, and then it turns out to be a slider breaking away, he's in and out of the zone a little bit too quick on those sliders. And just to put it in
right.
perspective here, if you're preparing to face Dylan Cruz and you see that he hit 300 against fastballs and 098 against breaking balls, what are you going to throw on?
What you gonna
So,
throw,
yeah,
especially as a righty? What you gonna throw?
exactly. So I just wanted to touch on that really quickly because like he's going to hammer fastballs and like really hammer fastballs. And he's going to make a living off of that by playing great defense, stealing bags and hammering fastballs. And the plate discipline's good enough where he's going to lay off enough of the sliders to draw his walks. But to
hmm
be the Dylan Cruz that he can possibly be, which is, an all-star, and potentially perennial all-star, that still looks like that's going to be the pain point for him through this year. And that was just something that I noticed there too. But again, it didn't help his case that Ryan Weathers looks like just for you fantasy folks out there, pick him up. I know it's spring training. I'm not trying to overvalue spring training samples or whatever it is. The data's completely different. He's throwing 99. He ate meat only the entire offseason. No, it was like a keto diet.
It was
But
keto, yeah.
no, he corrected somebody on X and said carnivore diet, so I'm going to keep just making fun of that.
Okay.
No, and he's the man apparently too. But I'm happy for him because I know that he worked his butt off to try to get himself to a point physically as well, where he can be reaching to the maximum of his ability. Remember, he's a guy that skipped the minor leagues almost entirely, and had some success out of the gate with the Padres. So just keep an eye out for him. But I don't want to delay anymore because we got a lot of questions to get through. We are going to do an episode just kind of catching up again on spring training, especially since you're getting these live looks.
Hmm.
Obviously, I'm trying to get out there as much as I can. The backfield games will get firing up. We were just talking about that before we hit record, and that's going to be, a lot of fun because that's where I can get a ton of live looks. But
Yeah.
we'll get into all of that probably next week after the top 100 drop, which by the way is March 10th. So
Yep.
keep an eye out for that. That's a Monday. Get into
Uh,
question number one.
yeah, we can. Real quick, a tease. Cam Smith. I want to spend some time on
Oh
Cam
yeah,
Smith.
go ahead.
And we could do that right now. We could also do that when we're flying through spring training takeaways.
Yes, yeah, save it, save it.
I'm
But
going to
I know
save it.
you got up close and personal look at Cam Smith, who doesn't look like a guy who's gearing up for his first full pro season, huh?
It was just funny. It was funny looking at him stand next to Jose Altuve. I'm like, okay, here we go.
I think you
But
could fit three Altuves in, two vertically, and then like one more horizontally into his body.
I think so. I think so. But yeah, let's get into question one. It was great. I mean, phenomenal rundown from our guys on X and Instagram, and two off the top that are kind of similar. One hitting focused, one focused. The first one that I want to hit is hitting focused. At B Shell 17 on X asked this: when analyzing a hitting prospect, specifically more under the radar prospects, what are the top three factors you analyze when examining their potential? For example, level, EVs, strikeout to walk percentage. Curious what y'all find most important. I think you have a big three that we've discussed. Like, obviously, it's not going to be uniform. Here's how I'm evaluating every single position player prospect in minor league baseball. But there's kind of like this holy trinity that you live by.
For sure. And it's funny though, because, I was just out in Arizona, for spring training and, catching up with my good buddy, Mike Rothenberg, who's one of the smartest, baseball people I know, and, working in the Diamondbacks front office, but also, was a professional catcher for several years and played at Duke. But we were talking about, and he was making a pretty compelling case of why zone contact, of course, very valuable statistic, may not be as valuable as we may think. Like there's some flaw to it, right? Because with how much guys are fouling balls off nowadays and spoiling, that is not going to count against you in the eyes of zone contact, but you're not really putting the ball in play. So if you foul too off and then strike out, that's still counting towards the zone contact side of things. So you can strike out looking, and that's contact, and then nothing. So it was interesting just talking about that and how zone contact is not as consistently directly correlating to offensive success as it did in the past. That said, it still does very, very strongly, but not as clear cut. Like I think in the past, you could go chase rate, zone contact, and exit velocity, whether you want to look at 105 plus, 90th percentile, all those things kind of achieve the same goal. But what I'm interested in continuing to try to kind of dig deeper on is contact figures that we can get a little bit more out of. But for now, it's going to just be zone contact. That still is imperative, especially because it's a really easy disqualifier. And that's probably the first thing, regardless, that we'll look at. I think it's a very easy and very easy correlation to success at the lower levels where if a guy has 75% in zone contact and the EVs aren't great at the lower levels, like it's probably going to be hard for him to gain, the contact ability. But where it can be a little bit of difficult and where the conversation Mike and I were having is like double and triple A, then how do those correlate to big league success? That's where it's become a little bit of a challenge there. But when we're analyzing like the lower level prospects, I think it's weighing those things out. And that's where it does become kind of just a balancing act, right? You have more room to give off of let's say the average, zone contact and high A, and I'm just making this up, is 80%, 81%.
Yeah.
if you are at 77, that's below average slightly, right? But if your exit velocities are above average, now it's a little bit more palatable, or you hedge that with a lower chase rate, now it's a little bit more palatable. But if you're slightly below average on the contact rate side and your chase rate is above average as well, now you're in this limbo where it's going to be really hard for you to hit the ball enough. So it is juggling those three things, but at the end of the day, I think quality of contact is king, and that's going to be the angles that you're hitting the ball at and how consistently you're hitting the ball hard. And that's going to be the thing that correlates most consistently to the big league level, right? Like a guy like Fernando Tatis Jr. never had great in zone contact rates through the
Yep.
minor leagues. I understand that he is, on the top echelon of exit velocities, but that's kind of the point. If you are in the top echelon, and that's why I'm looking at a Sebastian Walcott, and like maybe that's a guy that should be valued even higher because he's always hitting the ball hard. And yeah, the contact rates might be a little bit but he's always hitting the ball hard. And comparing it to Tatis and other guys, it's not that different at those lower levels. So that is like the trinity. But then of course you look at the deficiency there, and right away I'm thinking, okay, what is the mechanical thing that's contributing to that deficiency as well? If it's a
Right.
big in zone contact miss, then I try to find a zone. Okay, it's a big miss at the top. Okay, well, is he drifting? Does he get overwrapped behind him barrel wise? So then that's where the mechanics come in too. And I feel like that's where I really like to cook.
Yeah, I mean it's a hybrid approach where it's like, okay, do you check two of these three boxes? Do you check one of these three boxes? Do you check three of these three boxes? And the guys that check all three, chances are they're a top 30 prospect in all of baseball. And then where you decide between 1 and 30 is what you actually see via video and via live look. It's like, okay, how does the body look, right? Like how does the swing look? Is the swing something that can handle fastballs and off-speed pitches? Is it something where it's like, hey, are you going to get blown up by velo upstairs? Do you have a cold zone? Things like that. So it definitely is a hybrid, but I just wanted to make sure like people understood that like there are some boxes that you can check, but it's not like, hey, you don't check this box, you're not a top 100 prospect. I mean, you're looking at guys like, I mean, Chandler Simpson checks one of those boxes,
Yeah.
right? And he's a top 100 prospect because he checks the box that's most important, zone contact. He puts the ball in play, and he absolutely flies.
Well, and it's most important to him, right? And that's the thing is
Yeah,
that's where it goes back to our archetypes conversation as
right.
well, where Chandler Simpson archetype is speed, speed demon, right? And I
Yeah,
gotta like truly define these archetypes, but like he's a speed demon. If he's exit velocities and low contact rates, that's useless, right? So
right.
like that's where you're looking at it and saying, okay, I don't care as much about the EVs. Of course, it would elevate him, and quality of contact's always going to help anybody.
Sure.
But I'd rather him be, if he could be 90th percentile in one area,
Right.
would want it to be in the contact department. And then
Right.
the other
Versus
thing that
like
can elevate him is the swing decisions, which he actually has improved drastically as well.
which is like versus Spencer Jones with the Yankees, where you don't need a good zone contact from Spencer Jones. You want to see the EVs really play because you're asking this
Exactly.
guy to be a 30% K rate but hit 40 homer guy.
Exactly. And the frustrating thing with him is that the chase rate continues to remain high. So,
Yeah.
like, that's an area where it's like, okay, you're not going to make a ton of contact. You can achieve, and you're the three true outcome power bucket. Like, how can you get there? Well, you need to walk and you
Yeah.
need to hedge the swing and miss. And then again, that's where like level you're at and things like that are important. But you know, the thing that you can bank on improving generally is the exit velocities and sometimes swing decisions. Zone
Yeah.
contact and just contact in general is rarely going to get better as you climb unless you make a pretty significant mechanical adjustment. And that's the
Yeah.
other side of it as well. But I would say it's pretty much weighing everything equally. But the number one thing is putting those hitters into a like the archetype, the bucket that they are. And then
Hmm.
that helps me weigh those key data points.
Yeah.
And then, beyond that, you actually have to kind of pick apart the secondary numbers as well. Because if it's a guy that puts the ball on the ground too much, if you hit the living crap out of the ball and have a really high home run to fly ball percentage, like Juan Soto puts the ball on the ground at a fair deal, but every time it's
Right.
in the air, it's gone. And when
Yeah.
it's on the ground, it's 110, so it gets through often. So like that,
Acuna, Alonso, like all these guys exist. They hit the ball on the ground a lot. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. hits the ball on the
on the,
ground a lot, but
even when
when
he's
it's in the
good,
air, it's
yeah,
gone.
exactly. So those guys can get away with it a little bit more. But if you're like average, average exit velocities, average contact rate, average swing decisions, and you're putting the ball on the ground too much, that can kill you.
Yeah.
So that's the other side of it as well. That can be a mechanical thing that helps you get the ball in the air. So
Hmm.
I'm sorry. The answer is kind of everything,
Yeah.
but the key factors I would say is quality of contacts and exit velocities, whether that be average or 90th percentile or 105 plus, whatever you want to look at. Those are all, I think kind of overlap. And then, what you're doing at that level. And if you don't have access to the advanced data, I do think K to BB is still going to be one of the best things to just be able to keep up with and on fan graphs and stuff like that. But the last thing I will say is, generally speaking, angles as well. Like lower level guys, you want to see them hitting the ball in the air. Again, there's the outliers that get away with it, but you want to see
Yeah.
those guys hitting the ball in the air pretty consistently.
Yep. I think this is actually a harder question to answer, and this is pretty much the same thing, but pitching wise. And pitchers are, I think, easier to evaluate, but harder to pinpoint exactly what you are evaluating. This question comes from Jeremiah Geiger 2 on X. By the way, new host of Locked On Marlins.
Yeah.
Congratulations to Jeremiah. But when evaluating starting pitching prospects, what are the top three things you pay attention to? I think these are a little bit more like old head, to be honest. Like I look at how can you handle a workload? Can you throw over 110 innings in the minor leagues? I personally look at like, hey, like K to BB, as simple as that sounds. I want to
That's
see
the
you
most,
striking guys. Yeah.
even more with pitchers, it's the most like there's no more direct correlation to success than just K to BB.
Then K to BB. And it's like, it sounds way too simple. Like you want to hear induced vertical break on a four seamer, but there are sinker guys that are amazing. Like Noah Schultz is not a vert guy, but Noah Schultz is the best left handed pitching prospect in minor league baseball. Like there's no tried and true method to pitching success, but pitching success looks like a lot of strikeouts, not a lot of earned runs, and not a lot of walks.
I think there's no better example of how difficult it is at the end of the day when you just, you see people that work really, really hard on really impressive stuff plus models that still will spit out sometimes
Yeah.
like, oh, this Hall of Fame track pitchers who just threw like punched out 12 today had stuff plus that, the model spit out at 105, but this journeyman, spit out a 10, 108 or 109. Like
Right.
it's an imperfect science, which is what makes it so beautiful. That's a great tool. And every front office has their own model. So like, that's not to
Right.
say that like it's not useful. It's extremely useful. But at the same time, that's why I know a lot, there's several front offices out there that actually have the stuff plus model or whatever it may be and put an objective value on those pitches. But then they will bake in just human scouting write-ups and then bake that in either into the model or weigh them out and put them together, which is
Mhm.
really cool. But others have actually baked in the human component as a part of their overall model to evaluate the player, which is pretty cool. I don't know how you weigh all that or how that all works, but I think that is a really cool wrinkle in it. But on just the surface, effort is an important side of it too. Because like
Yeah.
in a game today, and again, it depends on the pitcher, right? Like if it's a guy that battles command issues and he's just letting it eat every single time, that usually will give me some cause for concern. But
Sure.
like if it's a Chase Burns who like he's throwing it as hard as he freaking can, it seems like every single time, but he's around the zone and he's big and he holds his velo, that's okay. But there's some smaller guys that spray the ball a little bit and it's high effort and it's like, well, if you aren't repeating your mechanics great at high effort and you have to maximize that effort to output the stuff that is making you a top prospect, that becomes a little bit more concerning. But the very obvious ones are like, and just kind of non-starters for it's kind of similar to the hitting side of things. Like there's just certain level like disqualifiers where like if I see that contact in zone contact rate with a hitter at the lower levels, that's at a certain point, like it becomes a very steep uphill battle to become a big league regular.
Yeah.
Even though those numbers don't correlate as much as we talked about, but you can really use it to eliminate guys at the lower levels pretty quickly, or
Yeah.
at least put them in a odds are stacked against you bucket. It's strikes, man, like
Yeah.
strikes.
No, I mean, like
It's
zone
not
rate,
just
strike rate, things like that. Yeah.
what I'm seeing more of, and we're going to talk about in the Brave system, is like a lot of guys they can locate one pitch.
Yeah.
It could be, and it's not just the fastball. Like some guys can spin that slider in there a ton, but they can't spot the fastball. Whatever it is, there's one throw that is the most natural for them, and then it's
Mhm.
trying to get to the other throws. If you have two throws that work, then I have a lot more confidence that you can find that third. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of times where I'm reading reports after watching a guy and just trying to see other opinions on a guy, and it's like, oh, if he develops that third pitch, well, he still can't even command that second pitch yet. So what
Right.
makes you think he's going to develop the third pitch was kind of the
Right.
conversation that we had on the Just Baseball show where you were venting about these guys that keep spawning new pitches, but they haven't even perfected their second or third pitches yet. Um,
Right.
it's along that same line, but it's more of just using the data to kind of tell you how good of a feel this guy has to pitch. Nolan McLean, for example, in the Mets organization, he's really pitched full time for not even a full year yet because he scrapped it after double A. But that's a guy that spins the heck out of the baseball and can locate his fastball. He can locate his slider. He can locate his cutter. And they're all different release points, or not release points, but they're all different like approach angles. So
Yeah.
that's a guy that like, okay, he's comfortable with different throws. And you look at the spin rates, it just spins off his fingers very naturally. That's a guy that I feel more confident can add another pitch or just develop that other pitch. But there's so
Right.
often where it's guys a 73% strike rate on a fastball or 70% strike rate on a fastball, then it's 55 on the slider, but it looks great movement wise. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, if he gets that third pitch. Well, if you throw him in the big leagues right now, big league hitters aren't even going to respect the second pitch.
No, they're going to
So,
spit. They're going to spit on the slider. They're going to sit dead red, and they're going to hammer you. And we've
yeah,
seen a lot of very good pitchers get to the major leagues and get killed right
yep,
away.
yep. So that's the big one for me. And then I think, dude, I think ground ball rate has become incredibly underrated
For
with
sure.
pitchers nowadays.
For sure.
Like you have all of the information in the world on these hitters. So you can now align your I know you have the limitations on the ship, but you can align your defenders where you want.
Yeah.
You can align your outfield where you want as well if they do end up hitting it in the air, but to also kind of hedge that.
Yeah.
But beyond that, there's guys that can just throw such heavy pitches. And I'm looking like a McGreevy, and I think that's why he's overlooked in the Cardinal system.
Yeah.
If you're going to get ground balls, it's a get out of jail free card when you're down in the count 2-0.
Hmm.
It's a pitch count saver, and it's something that is become somewhat of a lost art because everybody wants to get those strikeouts. But where hitters are just trying to get theirs and get their best swing off, a lot of them are going to get themselves out. And that's something that I do think has become very overlooked in general. And when you can blend the swing and miss with the ground ball rate, those are the guys that I think can be stars. And we're going to talk about that at question number 4, because there's one guy that does that as well as anybody in the minor leagues.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, dude, simply put, and like Skubal has an above average ground ball rate. Skeens has an above average ground ball rate. Obviously, you look at Framber Valdez and Logan Webb, and those guys are great, but they're unique. The best pitchers in Major League Baseball almost always have an above average ground ball rate because pitching in its simplest form. Okay, like let's look at baseball right now. What's the goal of pitching? Allow as fewer runs as possible, right? Fewest run total, that's the goal of pitching. How do you get runs in a Major League Baseball game right now? I think the answer from a lot of people would be hitting homers.
Yeah, go
So,
yard. Extra base
yeah,
hits at
can
the
you
very least.
the 3-run homer? Can you strike people out and can you keep the baseball on the ground? And the best pitchers in baseball can do both. So like what I like is feel for 2+ pitches and the capability of throwing a third, like you're saying, and just simply limiting runs in the modern game. And that is keeping the ball in the ballpark. If you're allowing a bunch of homers and you have a homer problem, I'm kind of worried, to be honest. And like
Yeah.
you see guys, you see young arms like I mean, at Josiah Gray when he first came up, like everybody was going yard. Brandon Pfaadt when he first came up, everybody
Yeah.
was going yard, and that's why the numbers look brutal. And guess what happened in the postseason? He stopped allowing homers, and that's why
Yeah.
everybody loved the Brandon Pfaadt thing.
Yeah.
Garrett Cole, like the final piece of the puzzle for him was limiting the long ball, and
Yeah.
guys like that, like with that four-seam fastball, Cole's going to allow home runs, especially pitching in Yankee Stadium. But if he is limiting them, like this guy wins Cy Youngs. Like
Yeah.
we look at that and it's like for me, it's limiting the long ball and it's the feel for at least 3 pitches that make a good starting pitching prospect.
The long ball is huge. I'm glad you mentioned that because if you have a home run issue in the minor leagues, it's going to only get a lot
Oh, you're
worse. And
gonna have a
you're,
major issue.
these hitters, man, they don't miss. They don't miss the mistake. And if they do,
Yeah.
they're so pissed that they won't miss the next one. And that's a big part of it as well. The last thing I'll mention on that front is a little bit of the archetype side of things as well. If you're a guy that walks hitters at a little bit of a higher clip, then I'm even more hell bent on you not giving up home runs. But if you're a guy that walks guys at a little bit of a higher clip, but you strike out everybody, it's a
Yeah.
little bit more palatable, right? And that's where the K to BB rate becomes the most important, and that's the most clear, even more than hitters. K to BB on pitchers, even in the minor leagues as well, is something that I think is one of the more easy, just indicators of guys that are going to have success.
Yep. Player and team specific questions in a moment, but before that, quick break. All right, our first player specific question has to do with one of the guys that came back in the Randy Arozarena deal. This comes from at GTR Golf 24. Aiden Smith seems to be viewed all over the place, from top 3 in the Rays system to 15th ish in Rays rankings. Why the disparity? Is Aiden Smith a top 100 prospect?
He's probably just outside, but that
Okay.
to that point like puts us in the higher side. And I know he slipped in Baseball America because when we put this question and I wanted to see what the where the industry was at on him, and Fangraphs I think had him really down there. Albeit it's a really good system, but I think, and this is the hard part, is we talk about objective versus subjective, right? And
Yeah.
objective is just going to be like what the numbers tell you, and then subjective is going to be what your eyes tell you, and then maybe some other things that you can take away with the context. Defense is the hardest thing to evaluate in in
Hmm.
in the prospect
You got
realm.
to actually watch it.
You
Yeah.
have to watch it, and it's so hard. I could go to. I've been to series where I'm excited to see a guy, and he gets two balls, like especially in the outfield. Like
Yeah.
he gets two routine balls, and then maybe one challenging one. It's like, okay, what did I get out of that? And that's why I'm very adamant that like to really get a good takeaway on defense, you got to watch the video pretty. Like you got to watch almost every single ball that the guy took that year. That's usually what I'm trying to do
Yeah.
on the guys that are obviously I'm not doing that with every single player. I wouldn't
Right.
even lie about that. But the guys whose value is predicated on their glove, I have to like, and then any shortstop prospect, obviously I would as well. Smith, I think you have mixed reviews on the defense where some see him as a potential, you know, elite defender in center field, and others think he can slow down and may just be like a fine, a solid corner defender, and that makes a huge difference for a guy that has some hit tool concerns, and you're hoping will be able to make enough contact to get into his budding power. That's the other wrinkle. He also is a guy that I think has mixed power grades where he has flashed this ability to get into impressive power at 20 years old. He was, 19 years old at the start of the season, and he popped 113 mile per hour exit velocity, but he doesn't get into it enough. He is a guy that pulls the ball in the air at a very high clip, and I think that's another thing where like people, everybody values that obviously, but I think
Yeah.
some value it more than others. And I always talk about it for the air pull guys. Generally, you want to see those contact rates be higher because it
Yeah.
requires a fair amount of barrel manipulation consistently, and his contact rates just aren't as high. So it's just whether you believe that he's going to get into the skill set or not. And
Mhm.
I just think that there's a lot to be excited about, but all of those things he needs to make a leap in every department to get there. So I think that is why he's such a divisive prospect at this point.
But you are banking on, or not banking on, you're betting on him making those leaps this year and looking like one of those guys. Oh, the Rays got their hands on another guy, and he's, top 50 prospect in baseball, top 60, whatever it may be.
Yeah, because I think he already started to do that at the end of last
Yeah.
year. And again, I can understand any ranking on him because he could also stall out. It happens all the time. It's
Right.
it's it's
Sure.
really difficult to project. And like, but the final 40 games, this cat slash 351, 451, 570.
There you go.
And that was in low A, albeit, but he was 19 years old at the start of the year. And then he got
Yep.
up to high A Bowling Green for, I think, three playoff games and had a hit in each of the three games and homered. So like, I think something clicked for him there.
Hmm.
And I do really believe that the defense can become quite good in center field.
Hmm.
And the air pull ability, like that, if he's striking out, he's going to get his power wise. I think he's going to give you defensive value. He can run a little bit, and I just it's such a high probability big leaguer in my opinion. And then you
Yeah.
still have the ceiling to dream on, and the swing decisions too. In that 40 game span, 17% chase rate. That does really kind of push him over the top for me,
Yeah.
because I feel like at that point, he's going to get his walks in there as well.
Yeah. I will never miss an opportunity to shout out Brody Hopkins. That could be a fleece
That
by Tampa.
could be a really. I love the trade for the Mariners. Like, keep trying. I don't care who you trade away, but
Sure, yeah.
good value for the for the Rays.
All right, Nat's question now. This comes to us from Cam_Nom on Instagram, Naum. The question is, out of the Washington Nationals' top three pitching prospects, Susana, Sakura, Cavalli, who do you think has the most reliever risk as of right now? It's an interesting question. Cavalli has obviously dealt with plenty of injury issues, and he's big league ready, so you think that he is the clear-cut number one answer. You watch Susana, he couldn't throw a strike for a little bit, and he was 101, 102 miles an hour. All of a sudden, he figured out how to throw strikes at the lower level, so you get really excited about that. And Sakura, I don't think you're obviously you see it, like you see the possibility of a guy like that turning into a reliever, but you are giving that guy every single opportunity to be a starting pitcher because he has shown so freaking well in low A. Like for me internally, Cavalli's pretty much a reliever at this point
Yeah,
already,
yeah.
and then Susana 2, Sakura 3.
Yeah, I think that's fair, and I looked at it more of like a Susana versus Sakura question, which is a fun one in itself. Because like Cavalli, you throw that guy in the bullpen, and if he's healthy long enough, you can bring him back into the rotation. But like
Yeah, but
I
you got
think
a closer. Dude.
goal needs to be like, let's get this guy through a season or most of a season. And like he hasn't thrown in spring training yet. I don't know what the health situation is yet. Came back at the end, in June, and then they shut him down again. Goal should just be get this guy on the mound in a game setting. He's big. Like, don't even waste bullets in AAA. Start him in low leverage, and then yeah, you could have a legit closer for you. And there's a national team that is going to be sneaky competitive this year, and like throw him in the bullpen and it helps your case, no doubt. Like that's an area where they could use all the help they can get. Um, Susana versus Sakura is a fun question because if Sakura had the year that he had, and he's got to come back from what what did how was it described?
A minor labrum surgery?
Yeah, that was by Mike Rizzo, right?
Yeah, I think
Minor
so.
labrum. He also said Mike Rizzo said something funny the other day. He was talking about the I think it was on Foul Territory. He's talking about the Soto deal, and he's like, yeah, you're worth what somebody's willing to pay you, and he's like, what I'm really proud of is that we were the first to pay him, and we signed him and we developed him, and I stopped right there. And I was like, did Juan Soto get developed? I would take credit for it too if I was the front office, but like, did the Nationals develop Juan Soto? I'll give them credit for identifying.
I
Did you
think I think
develop
the
that kid?
I think the man above developed Juan
Yes,
Soto.
yes, yeah. I get it. I get giving yourself the pat on the back there, but I'm imagining Juan Soto seeing that and being like, develop. What did you do
Yeah.
for me?
I was like this when I was 14, man.
Yeah, what do you mean? I got up and carried you guys to the World
And
Series,
and,
but
and again, it's not like he was a $25,000 free agent. Like he
no.
was, I mean, he was several million dollars. I think he was about $2 million.
Yeah, but they identified him. I'd take my victory lap too. But
Yeah, of course, of
that
course.
so there's no such thing also as a minor hip surgery, labrum surgery. So like I am, eager to see Sakura come back healthy and hopefully he's all good. But Sakura, they kept him down there like all year. So like I just want to see him also at high A,
Yeah,
double A, and see if that stuff plays the same way it should. I mean, fastball is good, like really good. The
yeah,
slider is disgusting, and the splitter is gross. But a lot of pitchers will overwhelm low A hitters when they've got three pitches like that, and it could be three above average pitches playing like three plus pitches. I think it looks like he's got a clear plus slider and a plus fastball, but it is just something to monitor. Susana, of course, the command becomes the bigger question with him, where it's like,
yeah.
okay, he's walked a lot of batters through stretches, but last year he took a huge step in the right direction, only walked 11%. Why I think Susana actually can get himself in the conversation with Sakura at this present moment of like who's the safer starter bet is because Susana did it high A. He gets ground balls and he blends a 36% strikeout rate with a 61% ground ball rate. Nobody in minor league baseball did that last year.
Yeah.
So even if he's walking 11% of batters, I think he's a guy that can mitigate that because he's going to get ground balls and he's going to strike you out. So I don't know what my answer would be because like Sakura is technically the more complete pitcher. If you look at like 3 pitches for a strike, not giving away free passes, but it's not like he's walking 2 per 9. He did have an 8% walk rate. So I don't know who would you bank on. I wouldn't say sticking starter, like bank on being a quality and reliable starter.
So it's way too early for me to view Sakura as anything but a starting pitcher, especially when it's been this good out of the
Yeah.
starting rotation. So
Yeah.
that's why I say Sakura is third on the reliever risk power rankings. And
Yeah.
and Susana, we have seen him walk the world. And
Yes.
those are guys that scare me. But to your point, and were we not talking about this 5, 10 minutes ago, ground balls and strikeouts are the key to being a great pitcher. So
Yeah.
there
I
are
think
guys
that's
in
correct
bullpens
though.
that do that too.
I do think that's correct though. Like it's just because Sakura could like just fill it up with three potentially and just
Yeah.
be such
Yeah.
a safe, reliable starter. Where Susana, even if he is a starter, he's gonna have days like we saw it even in high A. He had a day where
Right.
he back to back days or back to back starts where 5 walks, 4 walks, but then he finishes out the season with 1 walk, 10 Ks, 2 walks, 10 Ks. He's
Exactly.
gonna probably even at his best be a little bit of a roller coaster. And there's just gonna be days where it's like oh, he doesn't have it today. And you
Yeah.
just, get the bullpen hot and get your long man ready to go. It is like that kind of like volatility that you can see with some of these incredibly disgusting arms. Like, you see Edward Cabrera when he's on, it's 10 punchies and he's on no hitter watch, but then there's days where
Right.
it's not there. And you kind of know in the first or second inning. So it's just finding that consistency. The good news for Susana is, he has all the time in the world to do that. He's not even 21 yet. He turns
Yeah.
21 at the end of the month. But he's in that rare echelon of just pure talent. It's just kind of riding the wave.
Hmm. Roderick Arias shout with our next question, and I wanna kind of use this to open up another Yankee player conversation. This from Anashe_maps24 on X. Do you believe in the progression that Roderick Arias made with the hit tool in the second half of the season, starting around July 10th? So he gave you a date, and if so, how's his prospect status now and future outlook? Roderick Arias was a guy that was a big ticket international free agent signing for the Yankees. Obviously you see the toolbox, you see the promise, but he was striking out a lot, a lot. And then that switch, I didn't get to kind of make that query after July 10th. What did he do? But what does it look like?
It's pretty significant, honestly. And
Really?
I want to thank sorry, what's the
Anashe_maps.
Anashe underscore like I pride myself on being able to identify these trends. And we talk about it all the time, like, oh, I found the game where he made the swing adjustment and then pull it out from there.
Yeah.
I didn't know about this, to be honest, and it is pretty significant. This is also where zone contact is incredibly valuable, right? Like if you are and just to take before the 10th, he had zone contact of 69%. If you have a zone contact rate of 69% in low A, like you are a swing change candidate.
Yeah.
And if you don't make that change, then I'm gonna start to cast you aside. After that date onward, he ran an in zone contact rate of 81%.
Wow.
So significantly different. I would have to dive into the mechanics a little bit more and see, but I would guarantee that he made a substantive change because you don't just do that. And again, that's where I think zone contact is incredibly valuable at the lower levels, especially, and just overall contact in general, right? If you have that big of a discrepancy, there's usually some positive things going on there. Even just looking at it quickly now and just like what the mechanics look like, you know, he definitely altered his setup where his hands are, cut the leg kick down a little bit. And for guys like that, you've hit one way your whole life and it works for you when the pitch is coming at 80 miles per hour. And then you're overwhelmed and you're rushed because when it's 92, 93, 94, it just doesn't work the same way.
Right.
And you got to try to make that change, but it's really hard because you've never really hit any other way. And it seems like it may have opened up some new opportunities for him to make some more contact. So I mean, this is the perfect example of like I was definitely sliding him down, but you still have time to make that adjustment. And with mechanical change and the data to back it up, like he's giving himself more prospect runway as he enters his age 20 season. But here's the thing, it doesn't get any easier. They're going to put him in high A probably next year.
Yeah.
And time to test those adjustments, baby. Like it's tough.
Yep. Speaking of adjustments, how about George Lombard Jr.? Man, his spring training has been really fun. And I know that this was not a George Lombard Jr. question, but I saw the swing. I saw the homer at Steinbrenner. Man, that's going to be a fun watch this year in the minor leagues.
I mean, he looks like he like matured 5 years as well.
Yeah, dude, well, and his younger brother has already looked like that. His younger
Yeah.
brother is a 1-1 candidate
Might
in
be the one high school
2026.
game you and I are gonna like go to this year at some point, right?
Is
Like,
it Gulliver Prep? Is that right?
yeah, yeah. We used
Yeah.
to make that drive down there. They always have a good team, man. Always. And yeah, that's not too far from the stadium, to be honest. That's
Okay.
down there in Miami, so we could catch a game at some
I,
point.
I would do that. Yeah.
Um, yeah, we did that as one of our pit stops before we went all the way down to Key West. That's a fun
Cool.
drive down that way. That the difference physically and the difference mechanically. The Yankees, man, I think it got a little forgotten because Spencer Jones has struggled. You can't, unlock everything out of everybody. The Yankees have done a fantastic job of helping their prospects develop as hitters. And just identifying mechanical adjustments that are needed. We just talked about it with Roderick Arias. I wouldn't be surprised if they just said, it's hard to get through to some of these big ticket kids too, right? Where you're like, you need to change this, you need to change this. No,
It's like,
no,
well, I got $3 million
yeah.
doing what I was doing.
And I just hit 110 the other day. Yeah, but you're hitting 210.
Yeah.
And then once they struggle enough, then you get through to them. It's just a
Yeah.
natural progression. I think that final happened to Arias. I don't think that's a problem with Lombard. And that's why you hear like, uh, the idea of like, okay, how open are you to making those changes? But even for Lombard, like that was probably the biggest baseball adversity he'd ever faced was the challenge in low A last year
Sure.
and not putting up the best numbers in the world. So how can I make some adjustments and how can I get better? But also, son of a big leaguer, there's always more from the sons of the big leaguers. Like, what
Right.
can I do to get to that clubhouse that I used to be in as a kid and saw all
Right.
those superheroes in there? Like, I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet. So he made those adjustments way earlier than most other guys do. And hands are a little bit lower. You saw the leg kick is toned down a ton. And instead of getting like bringing it up and kind of bringing his body up and down, it's more of a sink and a gather, and he's controlling it so much better. So I think from that perspective, like he found the way that his body moves better and he controls it better in the box. And now you're seeing that natural talent shine through. I don't want to put too much value into two swings,
Yeah.
but it's without a doubt clear that he made some mechanical adjustments that I think are going to put him in a good spot to have success this year.
Cool. I will let you take a sip of water here as I read the next question. I know that you were having a coughing fit there, but appreciate you battling through that one. We've got a question here about high floor prospects from at pwood191919 on Instagram. Who is the prospect that you think has the highest floor? And it's a simple question, but I feel like it could have a vague-ish answer because you could look at pitchers that could be lights out relievers. Like Jackson Jobe has the makings of one of the best starters in Major League
Yeah.
Baseball, but he could also be a closer. So it's like, if his floor is closer, is that really high? Why are the highest floors in minor league baseball right now Connor Griffin and Jack Caglione?
I don't even know what their floor would be. Also, did my voice sound like I was like dying?
No, you're fine. You're good.
um, it's also the hard part with these questions is like you could also just say like, well, Roman Anthony's the best player, and the ceiling drags up the floor. So,
Right, exactly.
but for the sake of argument, and I think it would like relative floor to like who they are as a prospect, right? Like it's just like which players' floors are really solidifying why they are the prospect that they are in
Mhm.
terms of like their value. We talked about Dylan Cruz and like the slider struggles and stuff like
Yeah,
that, but like he's going to hit fastballs and defend his way to big league success. And what that
exactly.
looks like, it could be a 750 OPS for 12 years with good defense and stolen bases, and that's going to be 25 WAR. So like you could easily argue a Dylan Cruz, I think, but at the same time, I do still have those concerns of swing and miss. Job is like a very obvious answer, I think, too, because of what you said. Like, worst case scenario, he's getting outs in a
Yeah,
one of many roles, but he's one of those guys too that we is allowed to experiment with as many pitches as he wants because
for sure.
he has the Bryce Miller type of oh, I can experiment and find something because the
Yeah,
ball just rolls off my fingers differently. Paul
exactly.
Skeens as well, right? Like like Paul Skeens has the ability to just tinker and potentially find something,
Yeah.
whereas other guys, it's like perfect what you've got. What would your answer be? Because
So, yeah.
again, Job is kind of from that Roman Anthony cloth, though. It's like he's also just the best player because
Yeah.
Roki we're gonna abstain from this. Who, by the way, we'll talk about him as well. That was a
Yep.
lot better than what I saw in the backfields.
Dude, that was awesome.
So that was cool to see. But who would your answer be?
He's already in the big leagues, but Jacob Wilson is the easiest answer for me in
Yeah,
the world because he's not going to swing and miss, and he's going to play decent shortstop defense. So, like Jacob Wilson with the A's
let's do a
the clear.
non-debuter.
Okay, so I know he's a draft guy, and I know he's only played in low A, but Weatherholt screams high floor to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say Bazana, Weatherholt. Those guys are kind of the Spider-Man meme in a lot of ways where it's just I know it's not they have some differences to their game, but their strengths are so similar, and maybe their question marks in terms of power are kind of similar. But I watched freaking Bazana hit one 440 and just
Right.
pulverize one. So there's enough impact there. I think it's both those draft guys without a doubt, just because it's not and tying it back to the initial conversation we had. I think swing decisions continue to be undervalued in the analyzing of a prospect.
Yeah.
And that's why we have a separate plate discipline grade. So I should have probably hammered that home a little bit harder. Swing decisions are a huge, like absolutely massive. And both those
Yeah.
guys are superb in that regard. And Bazana's takes just so easy. Everything just seems so comfortable. I'd probably of non-debuters, I'd go with either of those guys. I think McGonigal could be in that conversation as
McGonigal
well.
is. There are two other guys that I want to throw at you. One pitcher, Thomas Harrington with the Pirates.
Yeah,
Like,
I bet my life he's at least a five starter.
exactly. At least a five and the ceiling of a three starter. Like he's pitch mix. He's got a great feel for that. The other one that jumped out to me, same division as McGonigal, Blake Mitchell. Blake Mitchell, the Royals catcher. Like he's gonna defend. He's gonna get into some pop.
I was going to
Like
say
I
Caro for the
understand the
same
hit tool
reason.
could dissipate, but
Yeah, I was going to say Caro for the same reason, Jefferson Caro. Because,
yeah,
like, yeah, like even if they are 30 hit guys, they're going to run into homers and they're going to defend at a high clip, and that's going to be a big leaguer one way or
exactly.
another. 50% of
Exactly.
Cal Raleigh is a guy that could hit 10-year service. So,
For sure.
like, catcher, the bar is so much lower to hold on to a role. So, I think those are great shouts, too. If you had to pick one, because you could also say Quinn Matthews, too.
You
Like, that
could.
guy's going to be a starter for a while.
I, if I had to say one, pitcher Harrington, hitter, I'm gonna go Weatherholt because Bazana, like I actually think Bazana has a higher ceiling than Weatherholt, like noticeably higher ceiling because Bazana could hit 25
He
homers.
gets into his power better for sure. For
Yeah,
sure.
so like Weatherholt just kind of feels like a slap the ball around the ballpark, play a good defensive second base. Like Weatherholt the hitter, Harrington the pitcher.
I like that. Yeah, and I'd probably I think McGonigal just because I think he's going to keep getting
Hmm.
better and he's already where he's at. I'd probably go with on the bat, but Bazana right there as well. And then on the pitching front, Quinn Matthews is a pretty easy one too because you have the classic like pitchability was there and now the stuff just
Exactly.
jumped. And that's another thing with pitching prospects. If you see the pitchability there and then the stuff skyrockets, that's
Yeah.
always the most appealing progression.
For sure. We've got a kind of college question, but one more quick break. All right. Our college question is, I think, a really interesting one. And we've talked about this a little bit, but we haven't really dove headfirst into it. Up next, MILB on X asked, might be an odd question. No, I liked it. What college/colleges do you guys think do the best job of developing/ producing future prospects? I think you look at, for me, it's easiest to see pitching wise.
Hmm.
You look at places with these pitch labs. Wake Forest, I will trust a pitcher from Wake, whether it's Rhett Lauder, whether it's Chase Burns, whether it's Sean Sullivan, even a guy like Hartle, even a guy like Massey. Like these guys in recent drafts, it feels like they're going to come in and be okay in the minor leagues and they can give you some legit prospects. LSU is one of the gold standards here. Vandy is one of the gold standards. I think you look at caliber of program, but you can also, be in a position where it's like, hey, if you're new school in the way that you are thinking, you can produce a slew of pitchers or a slew of position players.
Yeah, I think Wake on the pitching front, like they're still kind of catching up in terms of like seeing that all translate into like big league success. But you have a head start on so many of your arms in terms of being, analytically driven, understanding the feedback that they're going to get at the big league level or at through the professional ranks, and like eh, they're going to be probably pretty good at some things that other college pitchers are just not quite as adept to yet. So I think that's an obvious one. But Vanderbilt's been, I think, the gold standard for a long time, but we're kind of seeing them phase a little bit out where like you're seeing I think more of the modern or like the more recent players not quite get through at the same clip. Of course, you got the
Yeah,
Blades of the world, and Jack Leiter and Kumar Rocker is going to be there, but
right.
yeah, like I think some other teams are maybe churning them out at a little bit of a higher clip now, where it used to be like a monopoly being run by Vanderbilt. I think
Hmm.
UF, man, like Florida,
Yeah, I was going to say Florida's another team that we got to shout out.
they just, and I think that's more of a testament to them identifying stars and convincing them to go play there, which
Yeah.
I don't know if it's necessarily the development, but it's convincing them that your 3 years at UF for your progression, we're not going to do too much to you, but like you're going to become a better player. Although I say that, and as I'm saying it, I'm like, well, look at Wyatt Langford. I don't know how much you can credit, Sullivan for that or not, but like he turned into a really, really good player. Harrison Bader wasn't the guy that he became before he got there. So like,
Yeah.
I think that's a very easy one as well. Um, there's a
Yeah.
lot of schools, man, that
There's a
are
lot
that
of
are doing a
schools.
great
I'm
job.
thinking about the schools that like have had a moment. Like Louisville had a moment, and Louisville is on the downturn right now. But they gave us Will Smith and Dalton Rushing, and
Henry
I mean they
Davis,
gave
Reed
us
Detmers, Bobby Miller,
exactly
Tyler
like we.
Fitzgerald. Like,
We've had options with U of L, Oregon State. Like Oregon State had a moment, but then they're giving us Bazana in 24, and then this kid Arquette in 25. Right, Arquette's
yep,
a top 10
yep.
prospect. So I mean there are a lot of really good schools at this man.
Yeah, is there one that jumps out? I think it's becoming as even across the board as
Yeah.
really ever. Duke is a sneaky one too, where
Duke is
you've
one.
got you've
I
got a
mean,
few guys in
Stanford has had moments on moments.
yeah. I mean Arizona State has had their moments as well. I still think you got to go Florida. I think what Florida
Florida
does
and
is
LSU. Yeah.
Florida, LSU, and Vandy. I'll still give them their credit because they're going to still be able to churn guys out. But I think what Florida does pretty consistently is pretty remarkable. And there's going to be more on the way, right? You got Barco going.
Yep.
You've got more going. So I'd say Florida
Sproat.
for me. Sprout, yeah, geez, Sprout on the way. They do a good job of convincing draft guys to come there
Yeah.
and not forego college and put them out in a better spot than they were before.
Yep. All right. Cubs question. And they've got a lot of guys in the upper minors, which is what makes them one of the better farm systems in Major League Baseball. CHC underscore data drive on X asks, what current top 100 Cubs guys in AAA make the biggest impact in Chicago this year? Horton, Alcantara, Casey, Moballer, Triantos. I think there are two clear cut answers for me. And I wish I could say Casey, but Casey's not going to be given the runway with what's already on the roster. With Kyle Tucker, with Ian Happ, with Seiya Suzuki, like
And
Owen
he had
Casey's
that
not going to get the
surgery
ABs.
as well, right? The core muscle surgery, which may keep him out for a little bit.
A little bit. I think it was like 2 months or something.
Okay.
But Ballesteros is ready to hit in the big leagues. That's becoming abundantly clear. And the way he started spring training, they're going to find ABs for him in some form or fashion. And if he looks like a 40 grade catcher, get him to the freaking show.
Yeah.
And then Horton, if he's right, everybody needs starting pitching. Those are my two clear cut answers.
Yeah, I'm hearing Horton's back up to the midnight or back up to the upper 90s. So,
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
huge.
if
When I
Horton's
saw him last year, he was 93, and I still liked him.
yeah. No, like I've heard back up to, 97 plus. Like if he's back there again, I think that's the obvious answer because there's always going to be a need for pitching.
Yeah.
And I think you could argue that he would be an upgrade in their rotation right now if you look at like 1 through 5, if he's healthy and ready to go. Um, Obviously Matt Shaw would be the answer, but I don't even think we're counting him as a triple A guy. He's
No.
he's sharpied into third base there.
Yeah,
It's got to be between Horton and
by
Mo
Asteros.
Baller. Yeah. And the injury does make it weird with Horton, but if he's already back up to the upper 90s, like with the catching situation, I don't know if Ballesteros is going to get a look as easily as Horton
Horton.
probably could. But the crazy thing
Yeah.
is Ballesteros is shocker swinging it well in the spring.
Yeah, dude, he's been awesome this spring. So it's like, and I look at Triantos, there's just no space for him. And I look at Alcantara, there's no space for you.
Yeah, and I mean, what is Triantos is going to give you a diminished Nico Horner. So like
Exactly.
that's not really needed on this ball club, I don't think.
Exactly.
You could argue that the DH spot's kind of clogged with Seiya there because I would go Mo Baller if they had like an opening through the DH spot, but like there's not
Yeah.
really one there.
Right.
So that's the tough part. Whereas the rotation, I see Matthew Boyd, who you're hoping bounces back, but also has to be healthy at 34. You have Colin Ray, who's going to be 35.
Yeah.
You could very easily see a plug-in of Horton there. So I'm gonna say Cade Horton, especially because they all went out and signed Carson Kelly too. But at the
Yeah.
same time, they might just be if Amaya's not performing and Carson Kelly doesn't look great, they might be just so frustrated with the catching situation. They might say, "Hey, Ballesteros, come play 30 grade defense and hit bombs, and
Yeah.
and we'll survive."
Yeah. I think that might be the route 2 months in if they're not getting the production they want. And I don't know. I actually lean by Asteros just because of what he's done at every single stop over the last 2 years.
He's hitting almost every single spring training game so far as well too,
Dude,
and he
like
doesn't strike out. So
spring training, the fall league, triple A, double A, like literally everywhere.
it's just the catching. Like, please,
It's
like
just the catching.
get to 40 grade. But that's been the focus. I think it's the only thing he's worried about. So
Yeah.
I'm torn, but I think it's one or the other. It's one or the other.
Yeah.
It literally depending on performance and injuries. It has nothing to do with Ballesteros or Horton. I think both can make an impact this year.
Exactly. All right, two more questions. This one a fun one. This comes from Ryboy808ST8 on X. Chandler Simpson, rookie year Ichiro, Enrique Bradfield, 2012 Billy Hamilton. Who wins the foot race? What are their placements? So 1 through 4. Chandler Simpson, Enrique Bradfield, 2012 Billy Hamilton, and rookie year Ichiro. Billy Hamilton beats everybody by at least one like body length. Like 2012 Billy Hamilton was just an alien life form. So give me Billy Hamilton.
Yeah.
I think Simpson's second at this
I think
point,
I think Simpson second. Yeah.
and then I think Ichiro 3, Bradfield 4.
I might go Ichiro 4 because I think a big part of what made Ichiro so fast is that he was out of the. I mean, he's fast. Don't get me
He
wrong.
was out of the box
He was
so
out of the
quick.
box
Yeah,
as he swung more than any, and all of these guys kind of are, but him more than anybody. Like his swing finished with him 2 steps up the line.
yeah.
So like that's what made Ichiro so insane in that regard. Ichiro is obviously the best player of them all too, but
Oh
like,
yeah,
um, I would go Billy, Chandler. Yeah, Bradfield versus Ichiro is interesting, but Bradfield, Ichiro, because again, I think Ichiro just really had the swing that
yeah.
put him down the line immediately. I don't know if in like a sprint, like straight sprint race from a stagnant position, like if that's something that Ichiro is going to be
Yeah.
as good at, I
Yeah.
think compared to these other guys.
Yeah, I will say, like, if you give him a 100-yard dash or something, it's Billy, and relatively speaking, it's not close. Like Simpson's really fast, but Billy, real ones remember Billy Hamilton was a different breed.
Yeah, it was like check your stopwatch. You must be something wrong kind of thing
If
going
we
on.
had Statcast, I mean, he would, dude, in the minor leagues. I mean,
Oh,
the sprint speed records.
bizarre stat for you. You know, Ichiro was led the league in intentional walks in 2002.
Probably situationally, right? First
Yeah,
or second and third, man at third, one out. You knew he was going to put bat on ball and do the job, so you might as well just put him on first base.
yeah, I guess, but that putting the fastest guy or one of the faster guys in baseball on first base 27 times, 27
That's
intentional walks.
crazy. My thought is, I think I would actually do that if I were a manager. If I saw second and third,
Yeah.
and you knew that he was going to put the ball in play and bring a run home, I would just walk him.
It's almost a guarantee. Yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
but that is crazy. He led the league in intentional walks 3 different times.
that is cool. All right. Last but not least, I'm putting you in a position to maybe stake your claim early. At J. Bodlovich on X, Ellie De La Cruz, Junior Caminero, Zaire Hope, and Jesus Mate are guys you put your stamp on and rank them high on the top 100 list before anyone else.
Thank you.
Is there someone near the bottom of your top 100 or even off the list who you might see vaulting up your top 100 before others move him up?
Oh man.
Who's your guy this year?
I don't fully know yet. Like it's funny because I'll give some names. Like we'll talk about it when the top 100 update comes out of like,
Yeah.
what we maybe some of the other names that really just jumped out to us through the process and everything. But it's tough, man, because like my answer would have been Cam Smith, but like now it's like already too late. That
Right.
was our answer through like even the draft process and things
The,
like
the,
that is
I
Cam
will say
Smith.
the two names that I was expecting you to say, Cam Smith and then Eric Batanti in Milwaukee is
Yeah,
another one.
but Tonti's a guy that I could see absolutely skyrocketing. Those are the two, but again, Cam Smith has flown up the rankings so quickly that
Yeah.
it's it feels like that's almost like a cop out answer.
Right.
Um, I mean, dude, Connor Griffin with his skill set and his
I mean,
tools could
he
easily
looks
be a guy,
awesome.
but a guy that I truly like I've seen enough to where I just want to put that stamp of ours on. I know he's already up there, but I think Cam Smith, if he doesn't debut too quickly, could be the top 5 prospect in baseball. And so that's probably the like next superstar that everybody is hyped up about. Like that's probably the guy that I would go with. But as like kind of the outside of the norm, a little bit more unique, I would say Batanti, yeah, is the guy that I could see just being a rocket ship this year with the ability to hit for such a big, powerful, left-handed hitter. But yeah, the stamp is the Cam Smith guy. I mean, it's just different.
Got you. All right. That's our mailbag.
That's fun. We got to do more of those. I always, I
Yep.
always, I always forget how long it's been between doing each of them. But thank you everybody for such awesome questions. We've got some fun prospect interviews potentially next week as well. At least one next week and one the week after that. So keep an eye out for that. Obviously, we're going to start to talk about the top 100 as well. Braves top prospects also. That'll be a Saturday release. 13 of the 15 are pitchers. So that is a pretty wild scenario there. I don't think we've ever had that before, but some fun arms in there that we have not talked much about at all. So keep an eye out for that. If you could share the show with your friends, help us grow it. We'd really appreciate that. Leave a rating, review, subscribe on YouTube, and subscribe to the Just Baseball YouTube as well, because we're going to be putting out a lot of short form content when the top 100 comes out, biggest risers, info, all that good stuff on the prospect front. So keep an eye out for that, and follow us on socials as well. Instagram starting to really hum also, and sign up for the newsletter in the episode description. That'll do it. Look forward to talking prospects with you guys later this week.